Good morning. Merry Christmas to you. In acknowledgement of the holiness of the Scriptures, if you can, would you stand as we read the Scriptures this morning? Micah chapter 5, verses 1 to 5. The prophet writes, "Now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us, and with a rod they will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, but from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His going forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore, he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will remain. Because at that time he will be great to the ends of the earth. And this one will be our peace." You may be seated, and may God bless the reading of his word. I had heard of two ladies just a few days before Christmas. They were outside a department store looking through the big window at a nativity scene, the manger scene. And there were the clay figures of the baby Jesus in the manger, and Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and the animals. And the one lady apparently turned to the other lady disgusted and snorted, "There it is again, the church trying to horn in on Christmas." You know, sometimes, maybe it's not this raw, but we get really distracted at Christmas time because we think about the fact, well, what is this all about? Is Christmas just something you celebrate, or is it something you do? And if you do, what does it do to you? Written 700 years before that first Christmas morning, there was a prophecy, a scroll written by a prophet named Micah. And maybe you remember the old Christmas carol, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." Do you ever wonder, what does Bethlehem have to do with Christmas? What is the big deal of Bethlehem? Because here in verse 2, "But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little among the clans of Judah." Clan was about 1,000 folks. Little town. This one they won't even count among because it's so small. "So from you one will go forth for me to rule Israel. His goings forth are from long ago." How long? The days of eternity. What does this have to do with Christmas? You know, we tend to celebrate Christmas thinking it's something in the past we celebrate. You remember what happened 2,000 years ago. Baby Jesus in the manger. And it's all about then. But we forget that there's another then. And that's the future then. What if Christmas is not about only remembering the past? What if it has something to do that Christmas, you do Christmas, and it has to do with the future then, and somehow it changes your now? You know, this thing called hope. This last year, we've been just leaking hope. What would be the Greek word for this last year? It sucked. It just has. It seems like we're leaking hope. And everybody I know, it seems, including the news broadcasters, try to be sucking all the hope out of us. And yet I do stand corrected. Apparently Friday in the Arizona Republic, front page, front line, "A glimmer of hope." Well, that should do it. We got our glimmer. And let's just run with our glimmer because that's going to change our lives. They have even, I found in their study of hopelessness, despair, there's actually 9 different reasons for it. You got a menu here. You can choose how miserable you want to be with hopelessness. And there's alienation, forsakenness, being uninspired, powerlessness, oppression, you feel oppressed, limited, captivity, helplessness, and then the big one, doom. We're looking at doom. Hopelessness is basically believing this is about as bad as it could ever get. And it's never going to change. It's always going to be this bad. That's called despair. And there seems to be people that want to just rob us of any grasp of hope for the future. Because of the way it affects our now, if we don't believe there's going to be anything good in the then. When I was younger, I'll never forget the knock on the door. And two people were there, and it was Christmas time, and they noticed I had a Christmas tree in our home. I love Christmas trees. My wife's name's Holly. We keep ours up all year round. So we're into Christmas trees, but this couple said, don't you know you're blaspheming God? Don't you know that Christmas trees are forbidden in the Bible? I went, oh, shoot. You know what? What? Where does it say that? They took me to Jeremiah chapter 10. And the first 7 verses of Jeremiah 10, it says, don't take on the customs of the pagans. Don't learn of the nations, for they go out into the forest and they cut the trees down. And then they come and they carve on them and they decorate them with gold and silver. And then they go ahead and worship them. You see, God forbids Christmas trees. And I'm going, what? Now, unless you go home and you fall to your knees and worship your Christmas tree, because the context of Jeremiah 10's idolatry, they're going to the forest to make idols to worship. So if you are worshiping your tree, stop it. But you see, from the beginning, the Christmas tree was always a symbol. Yeah, but it was a symbol in the ancient pagan ceremonies. Ah, gee. Of course it was. Because the evergreen was the only tree that during the winter time looked like it was alive. Because all the other trees looked like they're what? Dead. So the evergreen was always, for all the ancient festivals throughout history, part in the center of a symbol of life in the winter time. Well, where are you going to find the hope of enduring life more symbolized and more expressed than the hope of life that came to us from that manger? See, the tradition of the Christmas tree started in Germany. Sprechen die Deutsch? God bless you. Martin Luther was the first to put little candles on the Christmas tree. Now, we don't do that because we don't want to burn the place down. But they were the stars of heaven about God's creation, because the tree was always a symbol of as high as hope, as wide as love, and on every bough there's a cross to remind us that it was the cross of Jesus Christ that provided our high as hope and the wide of love and this eternal life that we have. And so this whole tree, when someone comes to your house and says, oh, don't you know the Bible forbids? Say, no, we don't worship this tree. But let me tell you why we have a tree. And if you don't have a tree, that's fine. But if you do, explain, this is why we have a tree. It's to remind us that there's life even when everything else seems dead. And it's as high as hope, as wide as love, and on every bough, there's a cross. It reminds us who gave us that love and gave us indeed that hope. But you know, our word hope has lost some of its kick in the pants. Because we use the word hope like a wish. I hope, a hope. Add a few more hopos and maybe you get your wish through. But that's not what the Bible meant when it used the word hope. The Greek word is elpidos. It means anticipation, an expectation. It's something you know is going to happen in the future, and therefore it affects you now. And that's what this whole concept of hope is all about. What would you be like if you had absolutely nothing to look forward to? And what's going to get you up in the morning? What's going to motivate you to do anything? If you really believe this is the way it is, it's as bad as it's going to be, and it's never going to change, that's living despair. We would simply be a blob with a few reflexes to remind ourselves that we're alive. There's an ancient writer named Theogenes, and he wrote this, quote, I rejoice in the sport of my youth. Long enough beneath the earth shall I lie, and so be voiceless as a stone. Leaving the sunlight which I love, good man though I am, then shall see nothing more. Now that's the Christmas spirit, right? No, that's despair. That's hopelessness. And so here Micah in a scroll of this prophet, 700 years before that first Christmas morning. He doesn't seem to help us very much in the very first verse. It's pretty discouraging. Micah chapter 5, verse 1. Now muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops, for they've laid siege against us with a rod that will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. This is written at a bad time for Israel because they've just been overpowered by another nation. So we hear China owns most of Disneyland. And China owns this and China owns that. We're all going to be taken over by China. Well, I know what I've been doing. I'm making more Chinese friends just in case, you know. But this is what's going on here, is that Babylon's taken over Israel. They have taken them in captivity. And right now the people of God are saying, where is God in all of this? So he says, some translate this verse 1, you better gather up your troops and get ready to give your best shot because you're going down on this one. That's real encouraging. With the rod they shall strike the judge of Israel. King Zedekiah, the king at that time of Israel, he's in deep mud. He's in big trouble. It's not going to turn out well for him. And apparently Israel's wondering if they even have a future then. But then he comes in with verse 2 with this expectant hopefulness. Micah writes, but as for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah. You're not even counted because you're so small. But from you, one will go forth for me to be a ruler in Israel. And his goings forth are from long ago, from the very days of eternity. At this time of hopelessness, there's a small town mentioned, Bethlehem. And it's called the most insignificant. It's not even counted among. A clan usually was about 1,000 folks, or up to 1,000 folks. Here we're talking about a few hundred. That's why the only way they could identify, because no one really thought, this is called the house of bread. That's what Bethlehem means, about 5 miles south of Jerusalem. And nobody really knew. That's why you had to identify it by its district, ancient district, area, region, Ephrathah. So they add the Ephrathah so you know which Bethlehem we're talking about, this little town. Now what's the big deal, the mentioning in this prophecy about this little town? This is where David was born. The one who would become the great King David of Israel, this is where David was born. And those fields that the shepherds heard the angels sing, those are the very same fields that the shepherd bore David shepherd his sheep. And so he's born in Bethlehem. But when he goes and returns as king to rule Israel, he doesn't return to Bethlehem. He returns to Jerusalem. See, Bethlehem was called the city of David until David came back to rule in Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem was called the city of David, for there was the throne of David. What had happened is that David, when he came back to rule, he had this great palace. But the temple of God was a tent, a tabernacle. And he thought, we need to build a temple for God. So he tells Nathan, his number one prophet. God shows up at night to Nathan and says, bad idea. David's not going to be the one. The next morning, Nathan shows up to David and says, you know that idea of building a temple? Not going to happen. God says you're a man of blood, a warrior. It's going to be your son who's going to build it. And what was the name of the son of David? Solomon. That's why it's called Solomon's temple. Well, kind of a bummer for poor David. Well, no, because then God says, but I got something better for you. You know, when you came back to Jerusalem and established your throne, the throne of David I will establish forever. There shall come a king from your line, David, from your lineage, David, to sit on your throne in Jerusalem and shall rule all nations, all peoples of the earth forever. And it's called the Davidic covenant. Well, that'll make you feel a little bit better. Well, look at verse 3. Therefore, he will give them over for a time. Israel's taken over by Babylon and Medo-Persia, and then they're gone. But until when she who was in labor has borne a child. We know who this she is. About 200 years before Micah, there was another prophet named Isaiah who talked about she. Remember in chapter 7, verse 14? And there shall be a she, a virgin, who give forth a child. And that child shall be called Emmanuel, with us, El, God. Emmanuel, God with us. So when she who is in labor has borne this child, then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel. Then it's like Israel will come back as a nation. And notice what happens. 700 years later, Jesus is born. But who's sitting on the throne of David? Who's the king of Israel? Herod. Herod? Herod's not of the lineage of David. Herod's not even Jewish. He's an Edomite. Well, how did this schmo end up on the throne of David in Jerusalem? Well, like most of us, he married well. He married a Jewish heir to the throne, an heir of David. But this guy was so vicious. Later, he killed her. He murdered her and went on to murder 2 of his sons. This guy was crazy. Even the Roman emperor at that time, Augustus, said, quote, "It is safer to be Herod's pig than to be his son. Wouldn't you like to have a dad like that?" So when it was heard that these guys were showing up with these funny hats, asking about Bethlehem, Herod wants to know, they're talking about some king of the Jews. Excuse me, when you're the king of the Jews and someone's talking about a child being born who is the real king of the Jews, you're interested in what's going on. And so he asks his chief priests, and they go back and they open the scroll of Micah and read this passage. This exact passage is the one that's read to Herod. And so you have this Magi connection. The guys with the cool hats. Now, most likely, we try to stick them in a nativity scene because it looks good, but they didn't really show up till about 3 months later. And instead of 3, there's most likely 12. They moved in an entourage. But my question is, how did these guys know? And they're from the east, Persia. How do they know anything about a king of the Jews who's going to reign in a kingdom that's going to be forever so that they will come and pay homage to this king? How did they ever find that out? The Magi were magicians, conjurers from the Persian kings, skilled in philosophy, in science, and astronomy. And do you remember who saved the lives of their predecessors years before? See, there was a king named Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. And so he calls his Magi together, their predecessors together, to interpret the dream. And they don't have a clue. He's going to execute them right there on the spot. Just going to kill them all. Then some Jewish guy comes up and interprets the dream. And so these guys are not executed. He saved their lives. And what was the name of this Jewish man? Daniel. As a matter of fact, in Daniel chapter 2, verse 48, it says, because of that, Daniel was promoted to the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. And guess, for the next 500 years, all the wise men of Babylon and Persia studied the writings of whom? Hello, that's a softball. Of Daniel. Which means they would have read about Daniel in the lion's den. And they would have read about the fiery furnace. But the thing that they would be mesmerized by was a strange thing in chapter 7. Because they had been studying for 400 or 500 years this vision that Daniel has in his scroll. And here's the vision. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. God. His vesture was like white snow, his hair and his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames, its wheels were like burning fire. And a river of fire was flowing and coming out from him. Thousands upon thousands and myriads upon myriads of angels stood before him, and the court sat. This is a courtroom scene. And all that fire is all about his judgments about the flow. And the books were open. But the vision doesn't stop there. Here's the rest of the vision. And Daniel says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like the Son of Man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days. I don't think I would have gone up to him. He looked like he wasn't in a very good mood. But this one like the Son of Man was presented before him. One like the Son of Man. Do you know Jesus' favorite self-designation was Son of Man throughout the Gospels? He always referred to himself as the Son of Man. And critics will say, well, why did he just come out and say, I'm the Son of God, I'm the Son of God? Because he wouldn't last 24 hours before he'd be stoned to death. But he would refer to himself as the Son of Man. Now look at this. And to him, the Ancient of Days gave to him, one like the Son of Man, dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples and nations and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Now I'm a little confused. This sounds like what God promised David, and that David's throne was going to be forever and ever. So what's this throne given to one like the Son of Man? So grasshopper. This is the same promise. This is the same kingdom. One like the Son of Man is going to come as from the lineage of David, and this will be David's throne that the Ancient of Days will give to this one. Now, the reason I'm kind of excited about this is we get in on this. Verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed. There will be judgment first, and then the gift of the kingdom will be given to one like the Son of Man. And it says, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. You understand the world splits into basically saints and the ain'ts. That's it. Those are on God's side and those who aren't. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. We get to be in this thing. We get to be part of this thing. Well, when this passage was read to Herod, and he tells the Magi, yeah, okay, I understand. Bethlehem has something to do with this. Go check it out. Let me know where so I can worship him too. Like, right. Well, an angel shows up to the Magi and says, no, you take another way. And when Herod heard that he had been tricked, Matthew 2, he exploded. And this is the man who murdered his wife. This is the man who executed his 2 sons. Is it far of a stretch that he would demand the slaughter of every male child under the age of 2 in this little clan town of Bethlehem? Because that's exactly what he did. Because he wanted this Son of Man, this king, to be dead on arrival. And yet God had made a promise. And his kingdom would be forever on the throne of David. So he closes in verses 4 and 5, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord. Interesting. This is the king over all nations, every language. And he's going to shepherd his flock. Excuse me, kings fleece their flock. They don't shepherd their flock. And yet, what did Jesus say in John 10? I am the good shepherd. And my sheep know me, and I know my sheep, and I know their name. Boy, one day I'm going to be able to get rid of this name Darryl. Darryl the Barrel. I mean, it means region of wild animals. What was my mother thinking? My new name is going to be Duke. That's right. He'll know me as Duke. Duke will be in the house of the Father in the kingdom. But he says here, where else would you think a king who will rule over the world and every nation, every people, and he's going to know his sheep. He's going to know every one of you by name. It's remarkable. Then it goes on. In the strength of the Lord and the majesty of the name of the Lord is God, and they will remain. We're going nowhere, for this kingdom's forever. Because at that time he will be great. How great? To the ends of the earth. What does that mean? Because this one will be our peace. It's all about this promise that God made to David, that his throne would be given to one like the Son of Man, who would be on that throne and rule forever. Bethlehem. David was born in Bethlehem, the city of David. Well, when David returned to be king and to rule, he didn't go back to Bethlehem. He returned to Jerusalem. And when his throne was established there, that's when Jerusalem became the city of David. One like the Son of Man, Jesus the Christ, born in Bethlehem, city of David. But when he returns, he'll return not to Bethlehem, but to Jerusalem, the city of David, to sit upon that promised throne that will be over every tongue, every nation, after he brings the judgment for everything that is wrong throughout history. Everything that just breaks your heart that you see happening around you. Everything that is wrong will be made right. And everything that's been so right, that's been so punished, will be rewarded. For the judgment will come first. And here's the remarkable thing about this kingdom. It's actually a gift from the Father to the Son. The Ancient of Days gives to the one, like the Son of Man, the kingdom, the dominion. And when I realized that, that answered some questions I've had for a long time. Like, why is it taking so long? It's been 2,000 years. James, Peter, Paul all thought maybe Jesus would come then. Of course, if it was, then the gift, the kingdom, would have been really small and pretty much Jewish. But the kingdom, the gift of the Father to the Son, is going to be a kingdom with representatives of every nation, all tongues, all peoples, all races. You know why it's been 2,000 years? Because the Father is still populating the gift. Why would you give your son a gift filled with people who have no devotion, no love, no care for the king? What kind of gift would that be? And when Jesus was asked that one time by the apostles, do you know when you're going to return with the kingdom in Acts 1? And Jesus says, no, I don't know, for that's only known by the Father himself. We theologians go crazy. How could that be? He was omniscient. He should go, and then we have a cup of coffee and we fight over it. The reality is he said it. And the mystery is, could it be, Bible's here, could it be that the Father has not revealed to the Son? Because it's a gift. And see, in 1 Corinthians 15, it says once Jesus receives the gift of the kingdom, he's going to return it back to the Father as we move into the new heavens and the new earth. So all of a sudden this makes sense to me. Did you know there's going to be a second Christmas? And if the first Christmas, all the prophecies of the first Christmas, the first coming of Jesus Christ, were all fulfilled literally, what does that make you conclude about all the prophecies about the second Christmas, the second coming of Jesus Christ? Not out of Bethlehem, but to Jerusalem and the throne of David. If they're all literal, why wouldn't these be literal? Do you know there are over 300 statements in the New Testament alone about the second Christmas, the second coming of Christ? Do you know that 1 out of every 25 verses in the New Testament mentions the second coming of Jesus Christ? Do you know that every New Testament writer makes reference to the second coming of Jesus Christ? Peter, James, and John, they were it's a tough time. Rome's kind of the emperor. I mean, they're running everything. And they wanted to know, is there any future for us at all? They're talking to Jesus. And he says, well, I'll tell you a little bit about the future. And he sits down with them in Matthew chapter 24. And he says this in verse 29. Now he says, let me tell you how it's going to end up. Because you're dealing with a little bit of hopelessness. Verse 29, Matthew 24, but immediately, these are the very words of Jesus. They have to be. It's written in red, so they got to be Jesus. But immediately after the tribulation, this judgment, how do you know it's judgment? We'll read on. Of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heavens will be shaken. That's judgment. But then what happens? Verse 30. And then the sign of the Son of Man. Does that sound familiar? Son of Man. That's from the prophecy, the vision of Daniel. Very good. Son of Man will appear in the sky. So what it means is the Ancient of Days has given the gift to the Son of Man, Jesus Christ. Now he's bringing it to the earth after the judgment to claim the kingdom. And all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of sky with power and great glory. Well, that kind of talk gets you arrested. And Jesus was arrested, and here he is on trial before the high priest, in court, under oath. And the high priest says, let's get to it. Verse 63 of Matthew 26. And the high priest says, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. Now, if Jesus is going to back down, this is a good place to back down and save your naga hide, right? Listen to how he backs down. Verse 64. Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. High priest didn't take that very well. High priest tore his robe, saying, he has blasphemed. What further need do we have to witness this blasphemy? You see, it was the very reason they crucified Jesus. It's because he spoke of the fact he would be sitting on the throne of David. See, when Jesus returns, it won't be the Bethlehem. He'll return like David to rule and receive the kingdom. But the promise God made to David, it would be upon David's throne. And that's why the lineage that ties Jesus all the way back to David is all solid. But he comes back to Jerusalem. And that's why when you come to the end of the Old Testament, you got this strange passage in Zechariah. How many have your devotions in Zechariah? I didn't think so. Good thing I do. And here he says this in Zechariah 14, verse 3 and 4. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on the day of battle. That's the judgment. And in that day, his feet will stand on a Mount of Olives. Where's the Mount of Olives? I've been there 10 times. Which is in front of Jerusalem, the city of David. On the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in the middle. Man, when he lands on the Mount of Olives, he splits the mountain from the east to the west by a very large valley, so that half of the mountain will move toward the north, the other half toward the south. Then what happens? Verse 9 is what happens. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. In that day, the Lord will be the only one, and his name, the only one. That's our hope. That's Christmas. That's what it's all about. And you see, you got to understand why. And let me chide you lovingly. You can't let hopelessness take over on you. The reason is because hopelessness will breed absolute self-absorption, selfishness, and the reality is you're going to throw these parties. I throw these parties from time to time. They're called pity parties. The invitation is real sweet. Come and enjoy my misery. And I find people don't come to my pity parties. But I'm seeing more and more of these parties being thrown by people because that's what hopelessness creates. the more that you're driven by despair, you'll be totally absorbed with yourself. You'll be totally concerned with you. What's going to happen to me? And because of that distraction, you will not fulfill the most important thing Jesus said that a human being could ever do. In Matthew 22, to the lawyer, love God by loving others. But I'm not going to be thinking about your well-being when I'm absorbed with what? My well-being. But what if I die? Are you that fearful of heaven? It is only when we have joy, and the word joy means the absence of fear, that it is hope that frees me up from worrying about me, about what's going to happen to me, and throwing my pity parties so I can be freed up to care about you. I can care about your well-being. And so the question that could come to my mind is a fruit of the hope, because I know the then it's going to affect my now, because now what's on my mind when I have to make a decision, I go somewhere, I bump into you, is simply this: what does love require? For my tree is as high as hope, and because of that as wide as love. And every bough there's a cross to remind me, you're worth Jesus Christ to the Father. What does love require? So what can I give you? What can I say to you? How much time can I spend with you? Because the last thing on my mind is what's going to happen to me. Because that's already done. Because of hope. And you know what that spells? That spells Merry Christmas. Heavenly Father, thank you that our then is all taken care of. That we're on the side that's going to be part of that gift you're going to give to one like the Son of Man. For we're followers of that King now. And Lord, because you so love the world, you gave your Son to die on the cross. So whoever, any of us who believe in him, that Jesus is your provision for our forgiveness. That, Lord, we could be turned to be followers of Jesus Christ. And that, Father, you pack us into this gift that you're going to be given to the Son of the kingdom. And so, Lord, when we read the last 2 chapters of Revelation, for behold, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And behold, the new Jerusalem descending from heaven like out of another dimension, prepared like a bride for her bridegroom. And there the throne of David with Jesus Christ, who will wipe our tears from our eyes. And there'll be no more any mourning, no more any death, no more any selfishness and violence, for it all had been judged. And now we enter in to a kingdom, to an existence, a dimension that will be forever. Lord, thank you for our Christmas gift.